He thought he was just bullying another black woman, dragging her into a back room, shaving her head, and laughing with his buddies. But this racist cop had no idea his target was Judge Brooks, the one presiding over a case that could end his career. What started as an act of cruelty became the moment that shook the courthouse to its core. Before we explore the full story, sit back, take a breath, like this video, and subscribe for tomorrow's powerful stories. Lepuin. It was a crisp October morning, just after 7:30 a.m., when Judge Lena Brooks parked her Navy SUV in the lot across from the Richmond County Courthouse. The sun was just rising, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, and the old oak trees lining the street cast long shadows on the brick walkway. At 38, Lena was a federal judge, known for her sharp mind and quiet strength. Her short, curly hair was neatly styled, framing her warm hazel eyes. She wore a tailored black blazer and slacks, no judicial robe. She always entered the courthouse like an ordinary citizen, blending in to observe the world around her. Her heels clicked softly on the pavement as she carried a slim leather briefcase, her steps steady but purposeful. Born in a small Virginia town to a nurse and a factory worker, Lena had grown up watching her parents work tirelessly to provide for their family. That grit had carried her through law school, where she'd promised herself she'd make justice fair for everyone, no matter who they were. The Richmond County Courthouse loomed ahead, its stone facade glowing in the morning light. Lena adjusted her blazer, her mind already on the day's work. She was presiding over a high-profile case against the Richmond Police Department, accused of excessive force during a protest last spring. The case had drawn reporters, activists, and national attention, with TV vans already parked nearby. As she climbed the steps, a cool breeze rustled the leaves, and she felt a familiar mix of nerves and focus. Inside, the lobby was bustling, lawyers rushing to courtrooms, clerks shuffling papers, and security officers manning the checkpoint. Lena approached the metal detectors, her badge tucked in her blazer pocket. She never pinned it to her chest. It felt too showy. But the moment she stepped forward, the air shifted. Officer Dale Carter, a burly man with a buzz cut and a reputation for being tough, stood at the checkpoint. His gray eyes narrowed as Lena neared, and a smirk tugged at his lips. He didn't recognize her, and he didn't seem to care. "Hold up, ma'am," he said, his voice sharp and low. "Step out of line." Lena paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her tone even. Carter crossed his thick arms, leaning closer. "No ID pinned to your chest? You can't just stroll in here looking like that." His words carried a bite, and Lena felt a familiar sting. She'd heard that tone before, the kind that judged her before she could even speak. She reached into her blazer, pulling out her judicial badge. The gold seal caught the light, but Carter barely glanced at it, slipping it into his pocket like it was nothing. "I need that back," Lena said, her voice firm but calm. He stepped closer, his breath heavy. "You in a hurry, sweetheart?" The word hit like a slap, sharp and dismissive. A younger female officer by the X-ray scanner shifted nervously, her eyes darting away. Another guard, a lanky man with a bored expression, watched silently. "I need to get to my courtroom," Lena said, her gaze steady. Carter's smirk widened. "Then you'll follow my rules. Let's go." Without waiting for a response, he grabbed her arm, his grip tight, and steered her toward a side hallway, away from the crowded lobby, into a small, windowless room. The room was cold and dim, with bare white walls and a single metal chair in the center. A scratched table held a pair of clippers and a handheld scanner, their cords tangled. The door clicked shut behind them, the sound echoing in the stillness. Two other officers followed, a man with a shaved head and tense shoulders, and another with a blank stare. Carter let go of Lena's arm, pointing to the chair. "Sit down," he ordered. Lena stood her ground, her heart thudding but her face composed. "I don't consent to this," she said clearly. "You have no legal cause to detain me." Carter grabbed the clippers, his eyes glinting with something cruel. "You're acting suspicious. That's cause enough." He gestured to her hair. That curly mess could be hiding something. Lena's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. "I'm a federal judge. Check my badge." Carter ignored her, nodding to the others. The shaved-head officer stepped forward, grabbing her wrist and pushing her into the chair. Lena's briefcase fell to the floor with a thud. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice rising. Carter smirked, switching on the clippers. The buzz filled the room like a swarm of bees. "Standard check," he said. "Gotta make sure you're clean." Before Lena could move, he pressed the clippers to her scalp. Dark curls fell to the tile floor, piling up like pieces of her identity. The lanky officer snickered, muttering, "She looks better already." The shaved-head officer stayed silent, his grip tight on her arm. Carter kept going, the clippers scraping unevenly. "Should have come in with some respect," he said, wiping loose hairs from his sleeve. Lena's fists clenched in her lap, her knuckles pale, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes locked onto Carter's, burning with a fire she held in check. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and steady, cutting through the buzz. Carter laughed, tossing the clippers onto the table. "People like you always say that." He stepped back, gesturing to the door. "You're free to go. Courtroom that way." Lena stood slowly, her hands trembling but her movements deliberate. She picked up her briefcase and took her badge from the table without asking. Her scalp stung, patches of hair gone, but she walked out, her steps even, her heart blazing with purpose. The hallway stretched long and quiet, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Lena's scalp tingled, the uneven patches a raw reminder of what had just happened. Her curls, a symbol of her heritage and pride, lay in piles on that cold floor. She clutched her briefcase, her mind racing, but her face unreadable. She wasn't just any visitor today. She was presiding over a case that could shake the city. The Richmond Police Department stood accused of brutalizing protesters, and Lena's courtroom was the battleground. Reporters were already setting up cameras outside, and activists were gathering with signs. She never wore her judicial robe outside the courtroom, preferring to blend in to see the world as it was. But Carter hadn't seen a judge. He'd seen a black woman and decided she didn't belong. Lena's heels echoed as she approached the courtroom's heavy oak doors. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed them open. The room fell silent. Lawyers in crisp suits, clerks with stacks of files, and spectators in the gallery turned to stare. Some frowned, confused by her appearance. Others whispered, sensing something was wrong. Lena walked past rows of wooden benches, her steps loud on the polished marble floor. At the front, her bench loomed, empty but waiting. She set her briefcase on the judge's table, ignoring the murmurs. Carter stood by the side door, his smirk gone, his face paling as he sensed a shift. The bailiff, an older man with a deep voice, called, "All rise!" The judge's door opened, and Lena stepped behind the bench. She reached for her robe, folded neatly on the chair, and slipped it on, the black fabric settling like armor. She faced the room, her expression calm but cold, a storm held in check. "Be seated," she said, her voice clear and commanding. The clerk cleared her throat, her hands shaking slightly. Case 4521, United States versus Richmond Police Department. Charges of excessive force and civil rights violations. Lena nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. "Is the docket ready?" "Yes, Your Honor," the clerk replied, her voice steadying. Lena's eyes flicked to Carter, who stood frozen, his hands twitching at his sides. "Let's begin," she said, her words slicing through the silence like a blade. The first witness, A 22-year-old college student named Jamal Carter, no relation to Dale, took the stand. His voice trembled as he described being tackled by police for holding a protest sign. "They slammed me to the ground, twisted my arm," he said. "I wasn't fighting. I was just standing there." Lena listened, her pen moving steadily across her notepad, her face unreadable. The defense lawyer, a tall man in a pinstripe suit, tried to paint Jamal as aggressive. But Lena's questions were sharp, cutting through the excuses. Carter shifted by the door, his boots scuffing the floor, his eyes darting nervously. After Jamal stepped down, Lena called a recess. The room began to empty, lawyers heading for coffee, reporters typing on laptops. But Lena stayed seated, her gaze fixed on Carter. "Officer Carter," she said, her voice sharp enough to stop the room. "Step forward." He hesitated, his face reddening, then shuffled to the center, his boots heavy. "State your full name for the record," Lena ordered. Dale Carter," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "How long have you served as a courthouse officer?" 10 years, Your Honor." Lena leaned forward, her eyes like steel. "And in those 10 years, how many people have you pulled aside for random checks without cause?" The room went still. Every breath held. Carter's mouth opened, but no sound came. "Answer the question," Lena pressed. I don't keep count," he mumbled. Lena's voice hardened, each word deliberate. "You targeted me this morning, didn't you? Thought I was just another black woman who didn't belong?" Carter's face flushed deeper. "I didn't know you were a judge." "That's the problem," she snapped, her voice cracking the silence. "You didn't ask. You assaulted a federal judge in her own courthouse. You violated my rights, my dignity, and the trust of this institution." She paused, letting the weight settle. "Effective immediately, you're suspended. Officers, escort him out." 2 officers near the back moved forward, cuffs in hand. Carter's eyes widened, his voice rising. "Wait, you can't do this!" But Lena's gaze silenced him. "I already have." The officers took his arms, leading him out, and the courtroom doors closed with a heavy thud. The air felt different now, like a storm had broken, leaving clarity in its wake. As the recess ended, people filed back into the courtroom, their whispers louder, their eyes wider. Lena sat at her bench, her robe smooth, her resolve burning brighter than ever. The morning's humiliation, her hair, her pride, stripped away, lingered like a bruise, but it fueled her. A young intern, Sarah Miller, approached the bench, her glasses fogged from rushing. She was barely 20, her blonde hair tied back, her hands twisting nervously. "Your Honor," she whispered, "I saw what happened at security. I was right there, and I didn't say anything. I was scared." Lena's eyes softened, though her face stayed composed. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah. That takes courage." Sarah bit her lip, her voice shaking. "If you need me to testify, I will. I want to make this right." Lena nodded, a faint warmth in her chest. "I'll let you know. Stay ready." Sarah slipped back to her seat, and the bailiff called the court to order. Lena felt the room shift, like the ground was steadying beneath her. Spectators leaned forward, their faces a mix of awe and tension. Carter's empty post by the door was a glaring reminder of what had just happened. Sarah's words, small but brave, stayed with Lena, a spark of hope in a dark morning. She straightened her notes, ready for the next witness. The courthouse wasn't the same anymore, and neither was she. The next witness was Michael Evans, a 45-year-old high school teacher with graying hair and tired eyes. He sat in the witness chair, his hands folded tightly, and spoke about his son, a 17-year-old named Tyler, who'd been beaten during the protest. "Tyler was walking home from school, not even at the protest," Michael said, his voice breaking. "Officers grabbed him, pinned him down, broke his arm. They said he was resisting. He was just a kid." Lena listened, her pen moving steadily, her heart heavy but her focus razor sharp. The defense lawyer tried to dismiss it as a chaotic situation, but Lena's questions were precise, exposing contradictions in the police report. Michael's pain hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Then came Linda Harris, a former courthouse clerk in her early 60s, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She adjusted her glasses and spoke with quiet fire. "I processed complaints against Dale Carter for years," she said. "At least 25, maybe more, mostly from Black and Latino folks. People like Tyler, regular people. They'd file, and those reports would vanish." Lena leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Who made those reports vanish, Miss Harris?" Linda's eyes hardened. "Chief Security Officer Paul Vance. He'd mark them closed or shred them outright. Said it kept the courthouse orderly and professional." A murmur rippled through the gallery, a mix of shock and anger. Lena pressed on. "Why didn't you report this to higher authorities?" Linda's voice trembled, but she held her head high. "I tried once, years ago. Vance threatened my pension, said I'd lose everything. I had grandkids to raise. But I'm done staying quiet now." She looked at Lena, her eyes steady. "I should have spoken up sooner." The judge called a break, and the room erupted in whispers. Reporters typed furiously, and spectators shook their heads. Michael and Linda's testimonies weren't just evidence, they were a wrecking ball, smashing through years of lies and cover-ups. Lena sat back, feeling the shift, like the courthouse itself was waking up from a long, guilty sleep. During the next recess, Lena retreated to her chambers, a small room with a wooden desk and a single window overlooking the courthouse steps. She set her briefcase down and stared at a framed photo of her parents, their smiles warm and proud from her law school graduation. Her scalp still stung, the uneven patches a raw reminder of Carter's cruelty. Her phone buzzed with notifications, news alerts about Carter's arrest, a viral video of the checkpoint incident spreading across social media. She ignored them, focusing on her case files, her pen circling key points from the testimonies. A knock came at the door, and a woman in a navy suit stepped in, her expression serious. "Judge Brooks, I'm Karen Wells, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division," she said, her voice low but urgent. "We're opening an investigation into this courthouse. What happened to you this morning is a federal violation, and it's not isolated." Lena nodded, unsurprised but grateful. "Start with Paul Vance," she said. Linda Harris named him as the one burying complaints. Karen handed her a sealed envelope. "This is a formal request for your statement. We're reviewing every officer and supervisor tied to Carter, and we're digging into prior complaints. This is bigger than one incident now." Lena took the envelope, her fingers tracing the seal. "I didn't do this for the spotlight," she said quietly. Karen gave a small nod. "That's why it's working." As Karen left, Lena glanced out the window. The courthouse steps were crowded now, protesters with signs reading, "Justice for All," reporters with cameras, and Reverend Clara Jones, a local activist Lena had admired since her college days. Clara caught her eye through the glass and raised a fist in solidarity. Lena nodded back, feeling the weight of their trust settle on her shoulders. Back in the courtroom, the gallery was packed to capacity. Law students, mostly Black and Latino, sat in the front row, their notebooks open, their eyes wide with admiration. Reporters from national outlets like the Washington Post and CNN squeezed into the back, their laptops glowing. The air crackled with tension, like a storm was about to break. The defense lawyer, his tie slightly askew, stood and tried to delay the trial. "Your Honor, we request a postponement. The incident this morning involving Judge Brooks creates a conflict of interest. Her impartiality is in question." Lena's eyes narrowed, her voice calm but unyielding. "Counselor, I was targeted because I'm a Black woman walking into a courthouse. I followed protocol, showed my badge, and was assaulted for it. If anything, that proves why this case matters. Your request is denied. Proceed." The gallery murmured, a wave of approval rolling through the room. The defense lawyer sat, his face tight, and Lena called the next witness, a retired officer named Carl Thompson, a black man in his late 50s, with a slight limp from an old injury. Carl adjusted the mic and spoke slowly. "I worked here from 2005 to 2015, he said. "I saw Dale Carter target people. Black folks, Latinos, anyone who didn't fit his idea of who belonged. It started with small things, like extra searches, but it got worse. By 2010, he was roughing people up, intimidating witnesses. I filed a report once. It disappeared." Lena leaned forward. "Who dismissed your report?" Carl's jaw tightened. "Paul Vance. Told me Carter was doing his job and to let it go." The room stirred again, the murmurs louder. Carl's testimony landed like a punch, and Lena felt the case growing stronger, the truth piling up like bricks in a wall. By early afternoon, the courthouse steps were a sea of people, hundreds of protesters, community leaders, and curious locals, their signs bobbing in the air. No more silence. Protect black women. News vans lined the street, their antennas swaying in the breeze. Inside, Lena stood at her bench, holding a thick manila folder, its edges worn from years of neglect. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I'm submitting 25 complaints against Officer Dale Carter, all buried by courthouse staff. These are the voices of people like Michael Evans's son, like Jamal Carter, people who were ignored for years." She paused, letting the weight settle. "And I'm proposing a new policy for this courthouse, the Brooks Mandate." The gallery leaned forward, hanging on her words. "The Brooks Mandate requires anti-bias training for all courthouse officers, regular audits of complaints, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. No more hidden reports, no more protected bullies. This courthouse will be a place of justice, not fear." The room buzzed, a mix of gasps and nods. The defense lawyer jumped up, his face red. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the case. It's grandstanding." Lena raised a hand, her voice cutting through. "Sit down, counselor. These complaints show a pattern of abuse that enabled the crimes we are addressing today. They're admitted into evidence." She turned to the room, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. Michael, Linda, the law students, Reverend Jones in the back. "This case isn't just about one protest or one officer," she said. "It's about a system that lets men like Carter thrive, that silences victims to protect power. That ends today." She called for closing arguments, her voice ringing with conviction. "Carter thought he could silence me, silence Tyler Evans, silence countless others. But we're here now, and we're loud. Justice doesn't hide anymore." The judge recessed to deliberate, and Lena sat, her heart steady but her mind racing. Reverend Jones caught her eye from the gallery, giving a small nod. Lena nodded back, knowing this was bigger than her bench, bigger than this room. The judge returned after an hour, and the courtroom held its breath. The gallery was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Lena sat at her bench, her robe smooth, her hands folded. "On the charges of excessive force and civil rights violations, this court finds the defendants guilty," the judge said. A murmur rippled through the room. "Officer Dale Carter, for assaulting a federal judge, abusing power, and obstructing justice, you are sentenced to 5 years for civil rights violations, 4 years for abuse of power, and 1 year for obstruction, to be served consecutively." Carter, in handcuffs, stood at the defense table, his face pale and hollow. He looked like a man who'd lost everything, his badge stripped, his power gone. Lena met his eyes, not with anger, but with resolve. "You thought I was nobody," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room. "You were wrong." The officers led him out, his footsteps heavy, and the doors closed with a thud. The gallery stayed silent, no cheers or applause, just a heavy stillness that felt like victory. Lena gathered her files. the Brooks mandate folder on top. She'd send it to the circuit court, maybe even Congress. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, about making sure no one else faced what she had. As she stepped down from the bench, a young protester in the gallery, barely 18, whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." Lena nodded, her chest tight with emotion. The fight wasn't over, but she'd laid the foundation for something new. That evening, Lena sat alone in her chambers, the courthouse quiet except for the faint hum of a janitor's vacuum down the hall. Her desk was cluttered with files, but her eyes were on a small mirror propped against a lamp. Her scalp showed uneven patches, raw where Carter's clippers had cut too close. Her curls, a symbol of her mother's love and her own pride, were gone, but she refused to hide. A knock came, and her sister Tanya stepped in, carrying a small bag. Tanya, 2 years older, had the same hazel eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "Time to take this back," she said, pulling out a pair of clippers. Lena took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the mirror's edge. "Let's do it," she said. Tanya worked gently, buzzing away the jagged strands with care. Each pass felt like shedding the morning's pain, like reclaiming her strength. When it was done, Tanya handed her the mirror. Lena looked at her reflection, her head smooth, bold, unapologetic. "You're a force," Tanya said, grinning. Lena smiled faintly, her first real smile all day. "Maybe I am." She stood, feeling lighter, like she'd turned Carter's cruelty into something powerful. That night she walked out of the courthouse. No scarf, no hat, just her bare head catching the glow of the city lights. A small crowd lingered on the steps. Activists, neighbors, a few kids who'd seen the news. An elderly man with a cane approached, his voice soft. "Judge Brooks, my daughter faced cops like Carter years ago. Never got justice. You're giving us hope." Lena squeezed his hand, her throat tight. "Thank you, sir. That means everything." A teenage girl nearby, her hoodie pulled back, revealed her own shaved head and gave Lena a shy nod. Lena nodded back, a silent bond forming between them. Weeks later, Lena received a call from the governor's office. They wanted to honor her with the Virginia Justice Award for exposing corruption and pushing for reform. The ceremony was small but televised, held in a Richmond community center with wooden floors and folding chairs. Tanya sat in the front row, next to Reverend Jones and Sarah Miller, the intern, who was now applying to law school. Michael Evans and Linda Harris were there too, their faces proud. Lena stepped to the podium, the crowd clapping warmly. She raised a hand, and the room quieted. "This award isn't just for me," she said, her voice steady. "It's for Tyler Evans, Jamal Carter, Linda Harris, and every person who spoke up when it was hard. It's for Sarah, who found her voice, and for all of you who believe justice can be better." She paused, her eyes on her sister. "We're building a system that listens, that sees everyone, no matter who they are. That's the work we do together." The applause was deep, not loud, but heartfelt, and Lena stepped down, Tanya's proud smile brighter than any spotlight. She wasn't a hero, just a woman who refused to break, and that was enough. The Brooks mandate took root, adopted by courthouses across Virginia within months. Other states called, asking for details, and a senator introduced a bill inspired by Lena's policy. Lena kept working, presiding over custody disputes, tax cases, and small claims, but every ruling carried a new intention, a promise to hear those the system had ignored. One spring afternoon, she visited a middle school in Richmond, invited by a civics teacher who'd followed the trial. She expected a small class, but the gym was packed. Kids sitting cross-legged on the floor, some holding posters that read, "Be like Judge Brooks." Their questions came fast and fearless. "How'd you stay calm when that cop hurt you? Did you ever want to give up?" "What's it like being a judge?" Lena answered simply, her voice warm. "I wanted to quit sometimes," she said, "but I thought about kids like you, about my parents, about everyone who deserves a fair shot. That kept me going." A quiet girl in the back, her braids tied with bright beads, raised her hand. "Do you believe in the system?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Lena paused, then smiled. "I didn't always. But I believe in what it can be, because people like you are asking questions like that. You're the ones who'll change it." The kids clapped, their energy infectious, and the teacher taped a new sign to the gym wall. "Justice starts with us." Driving home, Lena felt a warmth she hadn't in years. Not pain, not anger, hope. The courthouse had changed in the months since the trial. Officers greeted Lena with respectful nods, and clerks smiled warmly, some calling her judge with a new kind of pride. A young security guard, barely out of training, gave her a shy thumbs up one morning, then blushed and looked away. The janitor, a man who'd worked there for decades, stopped her in the hall one day and pressed a fist to his chest, a quiet gesture of respect. Lena nodded back, her heart full. A news clipping appeared in the courthouse break room, taped to the fridge. "Judge who fought bias redefines justice." Someone had scrawled in marker, "Our judge." Lena saw it during a coffee break and smiled, not because of the praise, but because of what it meant. She hadn't set out to be a symbol, but her refusal to shrink had given others permission to stand taller. Lena's story spread far beyond Richmond, carried by news reports, social media, and word of mouth. It reached courtrooms in Atlanta, community centers in Chicago, and classrooms in Los Angeles. The Brooks Mandate wasn't just a policy. It was a call to action, a reminder that justice starts with everyday choices, listening to someone who's been ignored, speaking up when you see wrong, valuing every person's dignity. Lena's courage showed that strength isn't loud or flashy. It's steady, rooted in doing what's right, even when the world pushes back. Her story became a beacon for anyone facing prejudice, whether at work, school, or in their neighborhood. She proved that one voice, standing firm, can shift systems and spark hope. Change isn't quick, and it's never easy, but it begins with ordinary people refusing to stay silent. Lena's fight reminded us to look out for each other, to call out bias when we see it, to build a world where everyone's worth is seen. If her story moves you, share it with someone who needs hope. Like this video, hit subscribe, and join our channel for more stories that challenge, inspire, and show how we can create a fairer world together. Justice doesn't end in the courtroom. It begins with us, right now.